These are the 12 canned foods that smart families are quietly stocking up on in large quantities. The surprising part is that most of them are still sitting fully stocked on supermarket shelves, making many people assume there's absolutely nothing to worry about when it comes to supply. But behind those familiar cans is a very different story. America's cattle herd is at its lowest level in decades. Tomato acreage continues to shrink. The costs of metal, transportation, and production still haven't come down, while more and more families are turning to canned protein as a way to save money. In today's video, we'll go through each product one by one, why people are choosing to buy them first, and which canned foods are worth keeping in your pantry before everyone else starts realizing their value. Number 12. Canned pork. This is one of the foods that experienced families quietly add to their cart every time they go to the grocery store. They don't wait until prices go up or the shelves start looking thin before stocking up. They buy while everything still looks normal, because they understand that once costs begin rising, this is usually one of the first product categories to lose its regular discounts. The reason is pretty simple. The price of a can of pork doesn't depend only on pork. It also depends on the steel can, processing costs, labor, transportation, and distribution. Recently, metal packaging costs have risen significantly, pushing canning costs up by roughly 9 to 15%. If pressure from raw materials, transportation, and tariffs continues, cans that currently sell for around $2 to $3 could realistically increase by another 15 to 25% over the next 6 to 12 months. Usually, the first thing to disappear isn't the product itself. It's the familiar sales and promotions. The biggest advantage of canned pork is convenience. Just open the can, and it's ready to eat. Depending on the product, a single can typically provides about 7 to 20 grams of protein along with a fairly high calorie count, making it a quick meal in many situations. During a power outage, after a storm, or simply on a day when there's no time to cook, a can of pork served with white rice, instant noodles, or a few slices of bread can still give the whole family a complete meal without much preparation. That said, this isn't a food you should eat every day. Most products, including Spam and Vienna sausage, contain a fairly high amount of sodium. If you have high blood pressure or need to watch your salt intake, it's better to eat smaller portions and pair them with rice, potatoes, vegetables, or other lower sodium foods for a better balance. If you decide to stock up, follow the FIFO principle. First in, first out. Use the cans you bought first before opening the newer ones. Store them in a cool, dry place and avoid stacking them more than 3 layers high to reduce the chance of denting the cans over long periods. The most common mistake is seeing a sale and buying a dozen cans of the same product. A few months later, the whole family gets tired of eating it. People who have been stocking food for years usually rotate between Spam, pulled pork, Vienna sausage, and other canned meats, so the food naturally cycles through without feeling like they have to eat it just to use it up. What smart families are buying isn't just a few cans of meat. They're buying stability ahead of time, because when fresh meat, transportation costs, and packaging prices all rise together, one small can of meat sitting on a supermarket shelf can sometimes be the thing that keeps a family's meals from being interrupted. Number 11. Canned vegetables and potatoes. There's something many people don't notice when they shop for groceries. The canned vegetable aisle is still fully stocked every day, but new shipments are taking longer to reach warehouses than they used to. As fuel, refrigeration, transportation, and packaging costs all continue to rise, retailers usually don't run out of products overnight. Instead, they reduce the amount of inventory they keep in the back. That's why experienced families always pick up a few extra cans on each grocery trip, instead of waiting until prices start creeping up. Right now, most canned corn, peas, green beans, carrots, and potatoes still cost around $1 to $1.50 per can. They remain one of the most affordable food categories on supermarket shelves. But if energy, cold storage, and transportation costs continue climbing, those prices could easily increase by another 10 to 20% in the coming months. What's worth paying attention to is that sales and promotions usually disappear before shoppers realize prices have already changed. The reason many families quietly stock up on these foods isn't because they replace fresh vegetables. It's because they make sure there's always a vegetable on the table, even when the refrigerator is almost empty. Canned vegetables still provide fiber and many essential minerals. Canned potatoes, in particular, are a filling source of carbohydrates, rich in potassium, and can quickly become soup, stew, or mashed potatoes in just a few minutes. For older adults, or on days when no one wants to spend much time cooking, that's a convenience that's hard to overlook. One thing to keep in mind is that many canned vegetables are packed in salt water. If possible, choose the low-sodium versions, or simply drain the liquid and give the vegetables a quick rinse under running water before using them. That one small step can significantly reduce the sodium content. Most of these products have a shelf life of about 2 to 5 years when stored in a cool, dry place. Avoid placing cans directly against walls where moisture can build up, and check them regularly for signs of bulging, leaking, or severe dents. Most people see nothing more than a can of vegetables. Smart families see an inexpensive layer of insurance for their meals. Because when fresh produce becomes more expensive, spoils faster, or is harder to find, a few cans of vegetables on the shelf can be what keeps everyday meals complete, without paying the price of waiting until the last minute. Number 10. Canned soup. There's a reason so many experienced families always keep a few cans of soup in the pantry, even if they rarely open them. They don't buy them because cold weather is coming. They buy them because they understand that canned soup is one of the few canned foods that is almost a complete meal the moment it leaves the factory. Behind a single can of soup is a long chain that has to work together. Meat, vegetables, broth, seasonings, steel cans, processing lines, cold storage, and transportation all contribute to the final price. If the cost of just one part goes up, the entire product is affected. Recently, prices for some canned soups and other prepared foods have risen by about 22%, reflecting growing pressure from ingredients, energy, and logistics. That means cans currently selling for around $2 to $4 could continue becoming more expensive if those costs don't ease. What makes canned soup different from many other pantry staples is that it's already close to being a complete meal. In a single can, you get liquid, calories, some protein, vegetables, and enough flavor to enjoy after just a few minutes of heating. For older adults, people living alone, or days when you're simply too tired to cook, it's a choice that saves both time and effort while still providing a hot meal. A can of soup is also incredibly versatile. You can eat it as it is, or add noodles, rice, potatoes, chicken, or vegetables to turn it into a larger pot of soup for the whole family. That ability to stretch a meal at a low cost is why many people always keep a few cans on the shelf instead of waiting until they actually need them. When choosing a product, look for low-sodium or reduced-sodium versions whenever possible. If you're using the regular version, balance the salt by keeping the rest of the meal lower in sodium. Most canned soups will keep well for about 2 to 5 years when stored in a cool, dry place, as long as the cans aren't bulging, leaking, or badly dented. And don't forget to rotate your pantry every 6 to 12 months, so the older cans get used first. If you could keep only one type of canned soup in your pantry, which flavor would you choose first? Number 9. Canned broth. Not everyone buys broth to drink. In fact, most experienced families who stock up consider it one of the most important foundation ingredients in the kitchen. They understand that with just one carton or can of broth, many simple ingredients can be turned into a complete meal. What many people don't realize is that the price of broth is affected by several factors at the same time. When the cattle herd shrinks and beef prices rise, the bones used to make broth become more expensive as well. At the same time, there's the cost of cans, cartons, energy for hours of simmering, and transportation. As those costs add up, retail prices usually rise gradually but are much harder to bring back down. Right now, a typical carton or can of broth sells for around $2 to $5, depending on whether it's regular broth or premium bone broth. With ingredient and production costs still under pressure, many families choose to buy a little at a time, while prices remain stable instead of waiting until the sales and promotions disappear. The biggest advantage of broth isn't that it replaces a meal, it's that it stretches the value of other foods. Just add a carton of broth to soup, porridge, noodles, rice, stew, or sauce, and you can create a richer, more flavorful meal without using as much meat. That's why many people see it as a way to save on ingredients while still maintaining the quality of family meals. Nutritionally, broth and bone broth are not exactly the same. Bone broth typically contains more protein and collagen, while regular broth mainly provides flavor, along with some minerals released during the cooking process. When shopping, choose low-sodium or unsalted versions whenever possible, so it's easier to control your salt intake. Most products will keep for about 1 to 2 years when stored in a cool, dry place, as long as the packaging isn't bulging, leaking, or damaged. Smart families don't stock up on broth because they think broth itself will become scarce. They buy it because they know that when meat, vegetables, and the cost of cooking all become more expensive, one small carton of broth can still help create many satisfying meals at a much lower cost. In your kitchen, what dish do you use broth for the most? Number 8. Canned corn. There's something interesting that happens when the cost of living rises. Families don't necessarily have to buy more meat to make a meal feel more filling. Sometimes adding just one small ingredient is enough to stretch a pot of soup, a pan of fried rice, or a salad to feed a few more people. That's exactly why canned corn quietly finds its way into so many kitchens preparing for the future. Today, a can of corn still costs only about $1 to $1.50, so most people hardly give it a second thought. But behind that price is an entire chain of changing costs. Extreme weather has made crop yields less predictable. Fertilizer and fuel have become more expensive, while the cost of metal cans, transportation, and storage continues to put pressure on prices. The corn may still be on the shelf, but the first thing to disappear is usually the familiar sales and promotions. What makes corn different is that it doesn't try to replace vegetables or meat. It helps tie an entire meal together. Its natural carbohydrates, fiber, and B vitamins make meals more filling without requiring a lot of expensive ingredients. That's why so many families use corn to stretch stews, soups, salads, and fried rice when the grocery budget starts getting tighter. For young children, corn has another advantage. The kernels are soft, naturally sweet, and easy to eat. Just open the can, drain it, and mix it into eggs, noodles, ground meat, or mashed potatoes. And you've added another ingredient that makes the meal more appealing with almost no extra preparation. If you're buying it for storage, look for products with simple ingredient lists and choose no salt added or low sodium versions whenever possible. Most canned corn will keep for about 2 to 5 years when stored in a cool, dry place, as long as the can remains intact and isn't bulging or leaking. The greatest value of canned corn probably isn't the corn itself. It's its ability to help every other ingredient in your kitchen go further. And at a time when every dollar has to be carefully planned, it's often the most ordinary foods that end up saving a family the most. Do you usually eat canned corn as the main dish, or do you see it as an ingredient that helps make a meal more filling? Number 7. Canned beans. Black beans, kidney beans, baked beans. Have you ever noticed something? When food prices start climbing, the first thing many people change isn't where they shop. It's what they put in their shopping cart. One package of ground beef might be replaced with 2 cans of beans. That decision may save just a few dollars for one family. But when millions of families make the same choice, the entire market begins to shift. That's why canned beans are getting more attention than ever. They're affordable and fit into all kinds of meals. While demand continues to grow, manufacturers are still dealing with higher costs for metal packaging, fuel, transportation, and labor. On top of that, the financial struggles of major companies like Del Monte show that the canned food industry is no longer operating as easily as it did years ago. The greatest value of canned beans isn't that they completely replace meat. Half a cup of black beans or kidney beans typically provides about 7 to 8 grams of plant-based protein, along with nearly 9 grams of fiber. When paired with rice, pasta, or potatoes, they create a meal that's both more filling and far more economical than relying on meat alone. Picture a pot of chili simmering on the stove. Add just 1 can of beans, and suddenly the pot serves several more portions with almost no change in flavor. That's why so many families always reserve a small space in the pantry for black beans, kidney beans, or baked beans. Not because they want to stockpile as much as possible, but because they want to know they'll always have them when they're needed. Before using them, drain the liquid from the can and rinse the beans under running water for about 20 to 30 seconds to reduce the sodium. After every grocery trip, simply add a few new cans and use up the older ones first. That simple rotation keeps your pantry in good shape without feeling like you're stockpiling. Some foods are rarely mentioned in conversations about grocery shopping, but when the budgets of millions of families all start getting tighter, those same foods often become the first choice. Canned beans are one of them. In your opinion, which type of canned beans deserves a permanent place in every family's pantry? Number 6. Canned tomatoes. You walk into the grocery store and see an entire aisle of canned tomatoes filling the shelves. Your first thought is that supply still looks abundant. But what you see out front doesn't always reflect what's happening behind the scenes. In retail, as long as the shelves stay full, very few people notice how much the inventory in the back has changed. That's exactly what's happening with canned tomatoes. California, which supplies most of America's processing tomatoes, is expected to harvest only about 9.8 million tons in 2026, down roughly 11% from the previous year. Contracted planting acreage has also fallen to around 185,000 acres, the lowest level in decades. When production declines while the cost of metal cans, energy, and transportation continues to rise, pressure on retail prices becomes very difficult to avoid. Recently, the prices of many canned tomato products have increased by about 5 to 15%, and many industry experts believe that trend isn't over yet. What's interesting is that consumers usually notice the change fairly late. First, the sales and promotions become less frequent. Then come the higher prices on the shelf. There may not be another ingredient that shows up in more meals than canned tomatoes. From pasta and pizza to soup, stew, rice dishes, chili, and braised meals, just one can of tomatoes can become the foundation of an entire pot of food. That's why so many families always keep a few cans in the pantry. Not because they're worried about running out of tomatoes, but because they know it's one of the hardest ingredients to replace when they need to cook a quick meal. Nutritionally, canned tomatoes still provide lycopene, vitamin C, and many antioxidants. In fact, the processing itself helps the body absorb lycopene more easily than many forms of fresh tomatoes. That makes them not only a convenient choice, but also a valuable source of nutrition in everyday meals. If you're buying them for storage, keep the cans in a cool, dry place away from direct sunlight, and avoid stacking them too high to reduce the risk of denting the packaging. An undamaged can will help preserve the quality of the product for a long time. What dish in your family would be the hardest to make if canned tomatoes suddenly became much more expensive than they are today? Number 5. Canned tuna and mackerel. Not every change at the grocery store starts at the meat counter. Sometimes the first signs appear in the small cans of seafood sitting quietly on the shelf. As beef, pork, and chicken become more expensive, more families begin turning to a source of protein that's cheaper, easier to store, and requires almost no cooking. That's when canned tuna and mackerel start showing up in shopping carts more often. Right now, a typical can of tuna or mackerel still costs around $1.50 to $2.50, depending on the brand and size. Compared with fresh meat, it remains one of the most affordable sources of protein. But here's the challenge. When millions of families switch from meat to canned fish, demand rises very quickly. The seafood industry is more complicated than many people realize. It depends on fishing seasons, weather, fuel costs, processing plants, metal cans, and international shipping. If just one part of that chain slows down, prices on supermarket shelves can change. During the first quarter of 2026, seafood prices in the US rose by about 3.89%, showing that this pressure is no longer a distant concern. The biggest strength of canned tuna and mackerel is their nutritional value. A single can typically provides about 18 to 25 grams of protein, while mackerel also delivers a significant amount of omega-3 fatty acids. For older adults, people living alone, or on days when you don't want to spend much time cooking, it's an incredibly practical meal. Open the can and mix it into a salad, make a sandwich, or eat it with hot rice, pasta, potatoes, or crackers. When shopping, pay attention to whether it's packed in water or oil. Check the sodium content and look at the expiration date. If you eat it regularly, low-sodium versions are the better choice. Once the can is opened, don't leave any leftovers in the metal can. Transfer them to a sealed container and refrigerate them. Canned tuna and mackerel rarely create a sense of scarcity. But as fresh meat becomes more expensive and more families look for a lower-cost source of protein, these small cans can go from being something you pick up for convenience to something worth always keeping in the pantry. If you could choose just one canned source of protein to always have at home, would you pick tuna or mackerel? Number 4. Canned salmon. If tuna is the budget-friendly choice, then canned salmon is the higher nutrition option. In the past, many families bought salmon only when they wanted a change from their usual meals. But as red meat, chicken, and many types of fresh seafood continue getting more expensive, canned salmon has become a smart way to maintain the quality of family meals without relying entirely on fresh food. Canned salmon usually costs more than tuna, but it offers more in return. A single can provides a substantial amount of protein, along with omega-3 fatty acids, vitamin D, and vitamin B12. For older adults, these are especially valuable nutrients, particularly for meals that need to be quick, soft, easy to combine with other foods, and not too heavy. Salmon is also under significant price pressure. The salmon market depends on wild catches, aquaculture, fish feed, cold processing, transportation, and packaging. As energy, labor, and logistics costs continue to rise, canned salmon is unlikely to remain at today's affordable price forever. At first, shoppers may simply notice fewer promotions. Then the shelf price begins to climb more noticeably. One of the best things about canned salmon is its versatility. You can mix it into salads, make sandwiches, serve it with hot rice, crackers, pasta, porridge, or mashed potatoes. Just one small can add extra protein and healthy fats to a meal without spending much time at the stove. If you're buying it for storage, keep it in a cool, dry place away from direct sunlight and inspect the can before using it. Whenever possible, follow the first in, first out rule so the oldest cans are used before the newer ones. And as more sources of protein continue getting more expensive, a can of salmon in the pantry is no longer just a small luxury. It's a very practical layer of nutritional insurance. What about you? Does your family usually keep canned salmon in the pantry? Number 3. Canned sardines. The sardine section is rarely the busiest part of the grocery store. Most shoppers reach for tuna first because it's more familiar, easier to eat, and used in more recipes. Meanwhile, the cans of sardines usually sit quietly in the corner of the shelf. But that lack of attention creates a major advantage. Sardines remain one of the best values in canned protein today. A typical can of sardines usually costs around $1.50 to $2.50, yet it provides nearly 20 grams of complete protein, along with omega-3 fatty acids, vitamin D, and a significant amount of natural calcium from the soft, edible bones. For older adults, that's especially important, because not many canned foods offer protein, healthy fats, and calcium all in one small can, while also being easy to store. Another advantage of sardines is that they require almost no preparation. You can eat them with hot rice, bread, salad, mashed potatoes, pasta, or add them to a simple plate of vegetables to create a more nutritious meal. On days when you don't want to spend much time at the stove, one can of sardines can take care of lunch in just a few minutes. When shopping, pay attention to whether they're packed in oil, water, or tomato sauce. If you eat them regularly, choose lower sodium versions whenever possible, and avoid buying too many cans of the same flavor. Sardines have a very distinctive taste, and eating the same variety over and over can quickly lead to flavor fatigue. What's interesting is that sardines haven't been chased after the way tuna or salmon have. But as more families look for a source of protein that's cheaper than fresh meat, these small cans may not stay overlooked for much longer. Sometimes the best thing to buy isn't where the biggest crowd is. It's sitting in the corner of the shelf that most shoppers walk right past. Have you ever tried adding canned sardines to your weekly meals? Number 2. Canned chicken. Chicken is one of the most familiar sources of protein in the American diet. But not all processed chicken goes straight to grocery store shelves. A large portion is already committed to fast food chains, school cafeterias, hospitals, restaurants, and the processed food industry through contracts signed in advance. As a result, when supply comes under pressure or chicken prices rise quickly, grocery shoppers are often the last to notice. That's why many experienced families always keep a few cans of chicken in the pantry. A typical can of chicken provides about 25 to 30 grams of lean protein, depending on the size and brand. There's no need to boil it, shred it, or thaw it. Just open the can, and it's ready for chicken salad, sandwiches, soup, pasta, fried rice, casseroles, or mixed with potatoes for a quick meal. Canned chicken usually costs more than canned beans or vegetables, but the convenience makes up for it. For older adults, people living alone, or on days when you're not feeling well, it's a food that saves a tremendous amount of effort. During a short power outage or when you simply don't want to spend much time cooking, one can of chicken can keep a family meal from being interrupted. When shopping, choose low-sodium versions whenever possible, since many canned meat products contain a fairly high amount of salt. Once the can is opened, transfer any leftovers to a sealed container and refrigerate them. If you're stocking up, follow the first in, first out rule so the older cans are always used before the newer ones. Canned chicken doesn't completely replace fresh chicken. But during times of rising prices, busy schedules, or unstable supply, those small cans can keep family meals from depending on one last trip to the grocery store. Do you think canned chicken deserves a permanent place in every family's emergency pantry? Number 1. Canned beef, corned beef, roast beef. Some numbers appear only in livestock industry reports. Others are powerful enough to change the meals of millions of families. And 2026 is one of those moments. America's total cattle herd has fallen to about 86.2 million head, the lowest level since 1951. The beef cow herd alone has dropped to roughly 27.6 million head, the lowest since 1961, while the 2025 calf crop reached its lowest level since 1941. These numbers show that America's beef supply will take years to recover because it typically takes 18 to 24 months or longer for a calf to reach market weight after it's born. The impact is already showing up on grocery bills. As of early 2026, beef prices in the United States have risen more than 12% compared with the same time a year earlier. And with the cattle herd still at historic lows while feed, labor, and transportation costs remain elevated, beef prices are unlikely to return to previous levels anytime soon. That's why many families no longer see canned beef as just an emergency food. They see it as a way to preserve access to a familiar source of protein before prices continue to change. A can of corned beef or roast beef typically provides about 18 to 25 grams of protein, along with iron, zinc, vitamin B12, and niacin. These are important nutrients that help maintain muscle mass, support red blood cell production, and provide energy, making them especially valuable for older adults when preparing fresh beef is no longer as convenient as it once was. Another strength of this product is its versatility. You can eat it with bread, rice, pasta, potatoes, eggs, porridge, or salad. Use it as a filling for sandwiches, burritos, or tacos, or stir-fry it with vegetables to make a complete meal in just a few minutes. During a power outage, or when there's little time to cook, it's still a ready-to-eat source of protein. When stored in a cool, dry place and the can isn't bulging, rusted, or deeply dented, most canned beef products have a shelf life of about 2 to 5 years. That long shelf life is exactly what makes them a popular choice for family food storage. There's another important signal to watch. When beef supplies become tighter, retailers often prioritize their best-selling products and reduce slower-moving items. That can leave shoppers paying higher prices while also having fewer brands to choose from on the shelf. If you're buying canned beef, choose cans that are in good condition. Check the sodium content if you need to limit your salt intake, and pick a size that fits your needs so nothing goes to waste after opening. The greatest value of canned beef isn't the can itself. It's the ability to stay ahead of a market that even many experts don't expect to return to its previous prices anytime soon. That's probably why it ranks number 1 on this list. Not because it's the cheapest option, but because the signals behind it are stronger than almost any other canned food category today. For years, canned food was often seen as something you bought only when you had no other choice. But maybe what's changing isn't the cans sitting on supermarket shelves. What's changing is the way families prepare for the future. The people who buy early aren't necessarily afraid of running out of food. They simply understand that when prices become unpredictable, The hardest things to buy aren't always the most expensive. They're the ones that deliver the greatest value for the money. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss our upcoming analysis of food prices, grocery stores, and how millions of American families are adapting to the changes in everyday life. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.